First question, are you a good witch or a bad witch?
I don't know.
I'm just kidding. So here, look.
Yeah.
That's your book.
Yeah.
That's your fucking book. What do you think? I mean, you and I know how, like, I've never had that experience. I've had it with albums, movies, but not with a book. How do you feel?
It's amazing to hold it. I feel like I was totally prepared for how lovely everyone was going to be, how overwhelming it was going to feel. But the other night, I picked up my paper copy of it and started reading it and was like, oh shit, this is a book. It's amazing.
And it's a beautiful book, and we'll get into some of the structuring parts of it in a minute. But I mean, it's like it's a thing. You're a book lover. You're like a book nerd.
Yeah, I'm a dork.
You know, like I work at a bookstore, and on my lunch break, I go to the other bookstore. It's bad, but it's a beautiful book. So anyway, let's just cut to the chase. I'm going to start off with something a little kinky. Okay?
Great.
What the hell is food porn? And is that it?
Kind of. Food porn, I don't think we talk about that anymore. I think that was a Huffington Post era thing.
I'm a little behind. Okay, I just didn't understand. But I mean, you have this, I guess that we call it like a static description of food, you know what I mean, in a thing. And like obviously I haven't had much experience with food, but some. I played around in college.
Food curious.
But there's also this amazing thing, like it seems to me, and you try to explain it very, very acutely, but you have such an incredible memory for situations and an incredible memory for what you either cooked or ate on that. And I was wondering, does the food trigger the memory of the event, or does the remembering of the event trigger the food, or is it all just in there? Could you recall it right now?
That is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Because it means that I can remember what was in a sauce that I ate in 1995, but it also means that I remember every stupid fucking thing I've ever said in my entire life.
I know that feeling, yeah.
But food has always been like a huge part of my life. Both my parents were great cooks. It was really important to them, and so they made it really important to me and my brother. And it was always around, and it was always an event. So I didn't know that other people felt any other way.
Right. That's amazing, though. I mean, it kind of blows my mind. And then there's the implemented throughout the course of the book are recipes. And, I've seen that in other books that aren't cookbooks. But what I noticed was this recipe is, like, funny. This one is kind of sad. Like, it's like that you have an emotional, like, feeling to it. And sometimes you'll put a little tagline or something on it that will give it that perspective, but at other times it's just like sad lasagna.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you tell them what a sad lasagna is?
I accidentally figured out that a sad lasagna is when you have to make food for someone who's lost someone. And if you've ever experienced that or had to do it, like, you know exactly what that means. And when the person who I'm making eye contact with said that to me, I knew exactly what she meant. She said, I had to make lasagna. And I was like, what do you mean you had to make lasagna? And she said, it was a sad lasagna. And I was like, oh, fuck, I know what that means. I'm so sorry. I didn't even know what it was, but I knew I was sorry. But
the food, the recollections of food, not just in the recipes, but also, and I can't believe you put the biscuits recipe in there.
Oh, come on, everybody can do it.
All right, well, apparently so. I'll try. But it's amazing to me that you remember not just what you've cooked, but also what you've eaten. I mean, we all eat, I mean, it's a lot of memory. Do you remember all of it? Tons of it? Most of it? Some of it? Could you conjure it?
I guess lots of it. Sometimes something will happen that will make me remember something again. But yeah, I don't know. In the writing of this, there were a lot of things that I was frustrated that I couldn't remember. Conversations but never about whatever food was involved. That I always remember.
Right.
I lose details about people's names and when it happened and where we were,
Ditto,
but what we
right,
ate.
Yeah.
I always have that.
It's like I can remember every line of heroin. Like, and then you just draw a blank, Tell
me about July 31st, 1995.
I think I was in jail. Let's talk about Joan Didion.
Okay, let's.
I am obsessed with Joan Didion.
Same, obviously.
And I was going to ask you, because I know you're a big fan of hers and M.K. Fisher's, and you quote both of them in the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's this thing that I call the Didion curse, which is like, because I've worked on a memoir but never past a certain point, and I'll often like go to it, and you read Joan Didion, and it's like, fuck it, it's been done. I said, I cannot top this. There's no point.
Yeah.
Do you have that like?
Oh yeah, she's always standing directly behind me.
Right? She's
like,
so good.
I already did that. You don't really need to write about that. It's fine.
I know. Yeah.
But that, I mean, I think that being obsessed with that person's writing is really great for the emotionality of my writing, because to me, that's something I always wanted her to have more of. Like, Joan never really talks about sex, and when she does, you're like, oh, it's happening. Something is happening. And so I love her work so much, and I love how biting she is and how brutal she can be, but how like it comes from such a place of tenderness and like such a place of deep stress and anxiety, which I also identify with. And so to have her be one of my heroes, I think kind of like pushes me towards being a little bit more emotionally raw in my writing, and to just like say it, to just be honest and messy.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But it's amazing to me, and we'll talk about this a little bit toward the end of it, but that you really have a very specific voice that stays consistent from recalling childhood through present moments, awful moments, sad moments, beautiful moments, sexy moments, but you have a consistency of voice in the book, which is really hard to do. And I want to talk to you about, I want to get your editor's number at some point. But
there are a couple of them in the audience. We can make it work.
Did you ever, because the other thing about memoir is like, did you ever like have a moment where you're like, who cares about me? Who cares about me?
Oh my God.
Yeah, do you ever
Absolutely. Sean can attest to the fact that probably 9 to 75 times during the writing of this, I would just stop and be like, does anybody give a shit about what I'm saying? Like, is this important at all? Does anyone need to know what food made me cry when I was 14?
Right.
And I mean, I guess the answer is yes, and I'm really grateful that the answer is yes.
You did. I mean, it's really, the recipe works. But it does. And we'll get to that a little bit later, because we'll go through some of those moments if we have time. But I wanted to ask you, so you had this experience with Soup and Despair, and you obviously were a food critic for the Huffington Post, I believe. Is that accurate?
Not really a critic. They didn't send me on meals.
Right.
But I did write about food for them, yeah.
Gotcha. So how much of this was, because you talk a lot about the pandemic, which is amazing because the pandemic was so recent. Michael Cunningham's new novel was about the pandemic, and when I interviewed him, I was like, how did you wrote a book about the pandemic during the pandemic, a lot, the rest of us were just like walking into walls and wondering if we were going to get another check, but you do. And so I was curious, how much of this was, I think you're a journal writer, right? Because you do quote that Joan Didion that like, we are weird, but we write books.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how much of this was written, did this come from journals? Did you call stuff from different locations, or was the entire thing written anew?
No.
Is it like a mixtape?
So it's a mixtape. It's totally a mixtape. Some of the stories and essays in here are actual newsletters from Soup and Despair when I thought that it was appropriate to fit them in. Some are fresh, just straight from brain to you. And some of them I have accidentally been working on for a really long time, like before Patrick and I ever had a conversation about writing this book. The essay about the week that my dad was in the hospital before he died, for instance, I bizarrely started just like frantically writing on my phone, commuting to work in New York on the subway.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, is part of my process. When I get an idea, it has to come out. It will just ping pong back and forth in my head like a really mean marble until I put it down on paper, or whatever. And so a lot of that and a lot of writing about the pandemic was also that. This is a compulsion. I have to get the story out of me so that I can stop thinking about it.
I understand. I think I was going to ask you about that, because it's like you are very honest about a lot of moments in your life that are difficult to be honest about. And when we were actually speaking outside, we had to stop talking to each other because we were like, we're giving away our best lines. So we had just grabbed our beers and stared at each other anxiously across the deck from each other. But the idea that it's like, there was something freeing about it. And you said at one point, you said, I wanted to, kind of the overweening concept was, I want to talk about things that people don't talk about.
Yeah, and not to like a prescriptive or like beating a dead horse degree, but, there are so many moments in our lives that are so emotional, and we are so frequently made to feel shameful or embarrassed about that. And I have experienced so much of that in my life, and part of the joy of like becoming who I am right now, and I think honestly a little bit turning 40, is just like, I don't want to fucking keep secrets anymore. I just like, everyone has had these experiences. Tons of people have experienced tremendous loss or great joy in situations where maybe you're not supposed to talk about them, and to be able to feel other people's experiences of that, I think, is really unifying and relaxing and
Absolutely.
Important. So it was really fucking scary to say a lot of the stuff that's in this book.
Well, I was gonna talk about Sean, but this was a great intro to this. Okay. So basically, you speak very openly about your lifestyle, and you do it proudly. It's not something that's belabored, but it is something that is quite, it's abrupt, and it happens. Do you want to tell them?
Oh, sure. I'm a polyamorous bisexual.
Thank you. And what's really funny is that we've been really great friends for over a decade. I had no idea.
What?
Also living next door to two of the people, and I live. I know.
What did you think was happening?
Well, we never had that conversation. I mean, I never told you I was gay. Surprise.
You are?
Fuck off.
What did you think was happening when I was flirting with you for all of these years?
I don't know. I'll tell you when I turn 40. Fuck off. All right, so... So anyway, now that we've loosened up a little bit, there is this strange bias, right? Even as I was reading it, and part of it, I think, was, and you're not getting any names here, you're going to have to buy the goddamn book, but I was kind of like, oh my God. I mean, I was totally it was like, I don't know, because I think I have this, I had parents who were kind of like Ozzie and Harriet, and I had other parents who were like Ozzie and Harriet, and the only two kind of open relationships I've been in, I was not informed that they were open. So
I've been in those too.
Yeah, we have those loyalty issues, and it become a huge problem. So it's a little scary to me as well. You know what I mean? I'm sure it's scary to kind of do it, but you talk about it so beautifully. And my favorite thing is that you do it on page 21, and you're basically like, if you want to get off. Yeah. And then the amazing thing is that the stuff about your sexuality, which is going to only be controversial because it is a kink, and all kinks, including even just straight gay sex, are considered, moments, right? But I mean, as I was reading it, and kind of, at one point I was kind of like, whoa, and I was like, you were a hustler, you piece of shit, I was like, I was such a slut. I made a living telling my debaucherous, terrible sexual stories, and I'm having this kind of moment reading, and I was like, I'm learning more about myself than I am about you from this passage.
I have never heard you make that noise before.
I know. I don't know that I ever have.
Okay, we did something new together.
But anyway, but you write about it beautifully, and then you do an amazing trick, because you kind of introduce this concept early into it. And it's funny also that we live in Provincetown, where you can literally walk naked down the street while two monkeys shove an electronic thing up your you-know-what. There's a child here. And it's like, and somehow that's fine. It's like, oh, Tony, hi, see you for lunch. And then a committed couple, long-term married couple, who feel, able to open the bounds of that, and it's kind of like, woo!
Oh, you have done that before.
I thought I'd do it twice.
Yeah.
Just make sure I remember how to do it. Now I want to introduce, the other thing that's great though is that the much of your childhood is very relatable to everybody, you know, or at least to some people. And so after introducing that, you just absolutely normalize yourself to the point that it just becomes one part of your life. And, you know, and people can either finish reading the book or they cannot. But it's amazing. And I was really, I had that amazing moment where I kind of considered it. And, you know, it was really beautiful for you to do. Did you have to check with everybody to make sure it was okay? Because it's kind of like, you know, grabbing everybody by the hands and jumping in the pool.
I didn't check with anybody.
You didn't?
Hi, everybody. Listen, I didn't check with anybody because I think that everyone who I talk about in this book, I have been out in the street with. I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone who knows me that these people are involved in this book.
Right.
I also didn't say anything mean or shady about anyone whose name I mentioned, and
Exactly.
you will notice that if I don't mention your name, you can fuck right off.
You do have some amazing moments when addressing the unnamed people. But we'll get back to that in just a minute. So basically, the chronology of the book works amazingly, and the way you actually introduce, and I'm going to not give you any spoilers, but it's up to. But the idea that, you know, you introduce Sean, right?
Yeah.
And then the next chapter, you're like, I moved to Provincetown and fell in love with a fisherman. And there's no timeline. So it's like, well, was this before Sean? Was this that? And so it's kind of like the way that it evolves is so organic. And the way that the timeline is, I'm so jealous. You know what I mean? Because I keep like wanting to write like an autobiography like James Joyce. And in a respect, you did. You've got all kinds of different writing. No, I don't mean boring and drunk. I mean...
No, I took it as a compliment.
it's But no, I just meant that you've incorporated...
James Joyce was such a slut, by the way.
You ever read those letters? Oh my God! If you ever, Bloomsday is coming up, so if you don't read the book, you can read the letters he and Nora wrote together, and it is literally a little. Well, I mean, everybody's
Sure.
got their own thing, but woof.
Yeah.
It's like
Sorry,
when Napoleon was coming home from battle, and he wrote home to Josephine. He said, "I'll be home in 3 weeks. Don't bathe." Okay, so that's the chronology, and that's how you did. I want to talk about Sean, because I love Sean, you love Sean, everybody loves Sean.
Everybody loves Sean.
And it's pretty fucking brave, you know, to like, you know everything there is to know probably about Sean. I mean, the same, I probably know more than my husband knows about himself, you know. So it's like a lot. How did he respond? Was he nervous? Was he encouraging? Was he a little bit of everything? Was he supportive?
So Sean and I met in writing school.
Yeah.
And I had never dated another writer before. And when we started dating, I was like, oh my God, you understand how my brain works. And you know when to leave me alone. This is amazing. So Sean almost all the way through knew when to leave me alone. When I had questions or when I was stressed out about something and needed him to look over it, he was totally happy to and always very helpful. He has a really, really good structure brain, which I don't. I can just like bleh onto a page, and he's like, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here.
Awesome.
So that, we're a winning combination in that way.
Yeah, right? Seriously.
But also, he was very explicit about not wanting to read the whole thing before it was done.
That's fair enough.
He really wanted to be able to just experience it as a finished.
Well, that gives you a level of freedom too. You know what
Totally.
I mean? Seriously, I mean that's amazing.
Totally.
It's like, you know.
So he had to read it on my laptop, and he did it in one sitting, which was so sweet and amazing. And yeah, he's a hell of a guy, and he's also a dork and has really good taste. So I really wanted him to like it, and I was excited that he did.
Yeah, he is great. Give it up, 'cause that's really hard. Holy shit. I want you to read this because I love Sean and this is so romantic, and I want everybody who doesn't know you, there are two. There we go. So we just start.
That's page 3?
That's page 3.
Okay.
Great.
The first time I invited Sean over for dinner, I wanted to make it clear that I loved him, which I knew from the second I met him, although it would take us a few years to get from me knowing that to us really doing it. We spent those years sitting next to each other in classes. He'd bring me a grilled cheese or a carne adobada burrito from the diner across the street, and I'd save him a chair. He was funnier and smarter than anyone else in the class, but only our teachers and I seemed to realize it. We were both in serious relationships when we met, which we watched end of their own accord from our own separate platonic bleachers, until finally it seemed like it was our time to give it a try. Before he arrived, I cut radishes in half and smeared them with sweet butter and fat, flaky salt. It was lavender salt, he reminds me. I cooked grits gently over a makeshift double boiler for hours and poached shrimp in tomato sauce, rich with ribbons of prosciutto and white wine. We sat at the breakfast nook because my dining room only had a beer pong table in it. And we talked about how nice it was to already know how much we liked each other. I remember thinking that my parents were going to be really excited about him. I don't remember if I made dessert because we were officially in love after the first bite. I do remember going out to the balcony where he was sitting after dinner, putting his head in my hands and asking if he wanted to go to bed like we'd already done it 1,000 times before. After shrimp and grits, we never stopped.
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful.
They were really good shrimp and grits.
Yeah. I also love the fact, though, that you, at that point, even long before you discuss anything about your life, that you say the relationships died of their own and that, you guys were basically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's those kind of things in the chronology that kind of build this credibility as you move forward. But you literally, you tell the truth so obviously. And like I said, you have this sustained, you know what I mean? It's like, if I write something and read back anything autobiographical, I immediately think I'm Hunter S. Thompson, and I'm like, but there's just an amazing, were there parts you had to cut that broke your heart? Did anybody tell you to cut anything that you really didn't want to cut, or include something you really were nervous about including?
Honestly, not really. I feel like I got so lucky in this process. I mean, I think I was lucky that Patrick already liked the way that I write and knew what he was getting into. Because I would deliver things to him and he would be like, "This is great." And I was like, "That's it? You don't want me to do anything to this?" I will say that I cannot take credit for the chronology of this. I basically sent this off to Patrick in chronological order and was like, "Here it is. I don't know what to do with it." And he and Corey and I, but mostly he and Corey, really worked to make it this multi-textured kind of
jumping
around
like a champ.
And
well done.
The first time I read it, I was like, "Is this going to make sense to anyone?" But I had structure brain. I had Sean look at it, and he was like, "Yep, that's it. Yeah, that's the way." And it just stuck. I can only write the way that I talk, which if people like it, I'm lucky. But if they don't, I got to go get another job. So. Right. I've been really lucky in all of the times that people have actually paid me to write things, which is so cool, and I'm so excited every time it happens. Where, for the most part, even at the Huffington Post, the time I was there, I was really lucky that they were sort of like, "I don't know, do whatever you want to do."
That worked out well.
So I still had to write some dumb 35 mashed potato recipes that'll blow your mind. But I also got to do some heartfelt stuff, and
right, of course,
because no matter, even if I'm talking about mashed potatoes, this is how I sound.
Right.
So that's on the page, that's out loud. It's just, I'm really glad you guys like it.
It's great. Yeah, I loved it, of course, as you know. When are you guys gonna have a baby? That's a joke that if you read the book. You want to give a curt response real quick? It's your favorite thing, right? Your favorite question.
I mean, I just think no one ever comes up to you and Chris and is like, "When are you guys going to have a baby?"
I know, we keep trying, it just doesn't take. I know what you mean.
It's, well, you'll get to read all of the things that I feel about
But you describe it in a way that it is such an unbelievably invasive, personal fucking question that people of age get asked all the time.
Yeah.
It's just nobody's business.
Yeah, like, hey, when are you going to gestate a new life inside your uterus?
Right. And I'm sure I've probably even said that offhand to people, because I've seen it
Sure,
on
me too.
every episode of whatever the show is where they all die at the end. Right. But anyway, I loved the way that you did that, and you kind of wrapped it up at the end, which was really, really nice.
Yeah.
I had initially asked if you would read the piece, but I don't want to do that now. So I would like to just jump over it and say you are a survivor of sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm. Most women are.
Most women are. The Me Too movement, I remember that. I went on my computer and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know there's so many of you. And like everybody jumped on. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, like, the really fucked up thing about it is that a lot of us don't even realize that that had happened until you're an adult and you're like, oh, I didn't want to do that.
Right.
So it felt really unzipping my skin, like, to tell that story in this book. But again, so many people have had that experience, and not being allowed to talk about it because it might make somebody else uncomfortable sucks, and makes you keep secrets that, like, roll over and over in the fucking rock tumbler in your chest. And, like, I just don't want to do that anymore, and I don't think that anybody should have to.
But, you know, there are people who've written memoirs based on nothing more than an incident like that.
Yeah.
You actually seem to not only have dealt with it, but, like, you even are kind of optimistic and open sexually, which a lot of people just shut down.
For sure.
Do you think, I mean, this stupid question, it's like asking you when you're going to have a baby. I was just going to say, but, you know, it's like, I don't know, there's that weird thing about writing erotica, right?
Yeah.
And that is a little bit like, when I do it, sometimes it's like, I just want to go back and read it again, you know? And I was like, this is so SVU, like serial killers, you know, keeping something so, like, because they feel it when they see it again. But I wanted to know if like writing the sexy stuff turns you on a little bit, or if it brings back that, because if the food triggers it, I would assume that the...
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I love senses.
I know.
Someone once called me a voluptuary, which is the best compliment I've ever gotten in my entire life.
Wow, that's better than I was. Yeah.
That's how I want to live. You know, I feel like the pleasures are the point. But yeah, writing the sexy stuff is hot. But also, that's also something that we're not supposed to write books about, and people get scandalized. Like, right. Oh my God, adult human beings touch each other's bodies. I just wanted it to, like everything else, be a part of the story of my life and how I came to be the person that I am. And sex is a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. I love touching other people.
I do too.
Now we're flirting.
I know. Can we see a show of hands? No, I'm kidding. I'm just fucking with y'all. I keep checking the time because I just don't want to keep going. I'm going to pay you a compliment that is absolutely legitimate, because you know how I feel.
Okay.
I believe that much of the work you did at the end of the book about your father's passing and your mother's moving on or not moving on, which is something that I dealt with and am dealing with my mom now. It was the most heartbreaking and comforting writing about grief since Joan. I mean, it really hit me, and it made me cry a lot. But it also made me totally love you so much more.
Thanks, babe.
I wonder how many of you guys have been through it, too. I'm sure a lot of you. I love a lot of you already, but my God, when you're going through that, you know, in the room and the whole thing, and everybody says, oh, it's so peaceful. It's like, no, it's like fucking war.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make you read about that either, sorry. You can read the book, it's great, but there's no reason. It's a joyful book, and it's wonderful. I wanted to ask, what is the difference between being, you know, a restaurant worker and a restaurant owner?
That really depends on the restaurant owner. I think there are a lot of different ways to own a restaurant. I own a restaurant that I work in pretty much every day it's open. And Sean and I both try really, really hard to treat it like we work there. And we try really hard to treat the people who work for us as people who we work with.
That's awesome.
Because I've worked in restaurants where the people who own it treat you like a servant and an asshole. And I never wanted to be like that. I mean, it's not just restaurants. I've had a lot of bosses like that. But part of the reason we opened this restaurant together is because we really like them. And we really like being in them. And we really like working with food. So it is exhausting, and it is not getting easier as the age goes up. But I still love it. It brings me, obviously, a lot of joy to feed people, and I get to do it on a very grand scale in the summertime. But yeah, it's really fun to own a restaurant when you're like out in the world, and people are like, "Ooh, how's the shop?"
Right.
And when you're like fingering the sink catch to get the dough out of it so that the sink will drain, it's not that fun.
Right.
I always want to make sure that people know that both of those things exist.
I think that's great. Next time somebody asks you when you're going to have a baby, you should say, "I do, bitch."
I do. I actually say that all the time. Why would I have a child? I have all of you.
Exactly. What's the hot item? Is there like
hot item
on the menu? Like what's your favorite?
Probably everyone in this room already knows the answer to this question. But when Sean and I opened that sandwich shop, we were like, we have to just make a dumb fucking turkey sandwich. Like, that's what everybody's going to want, and we're going to make the best possible version of it that we can, and we're going to give it a name that is both a call out to our friend who is a male porn star named Agent Dale Cooper, and the double entendre will be that it's a Twin Peaks reference about a guy who has a really boring order. But unfortunately, that sandwich is really good. I eat it all the time, too. So several people in this room can make that in their sleep. I'm sure you've had nightmares about it. Me too. But at the end of the day, it's like that sandwich is the reason that I got to take the winter off and write this book. It's the reason I get to travel. It's the reason I get to live this like incredible double-sided pirate life of very, very, very busy and very, very, very not busy. So it's the Agent Dale Cooper.
I know. I'm right there with you. Seriously. I know.
It's Piano Man.
It is. It is. I know exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. I see you. I know.
But anyway, I totally understand what you're saying because, like, Susan and I got together to form Scream Along because we were tired of being in bands with, you always have these type A guys, right?
Yeah.
It's a fight that Mick and Keith, even if, like, you're literally just playing, once a week at the Underground, but it's like, it's too much. Wow. But that idea of, like, being your own boss and actually, like, being the kind of boss that you would have, you could have people work for you for years and they love you and you hang out with them outside. It's really like a family. And you describe your kind of pod during the pandemic and how you guys did that. And you speak beautifully about the pandemic, about its impact on us. Like, I had forgotten that, like, for almost a year and a half, we didn't know what the fuck was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then when it came back around and everything was still happening, it was like, it's all the horror without any of the money.
Yeah.
And it was really tough, but I feel like the pandemic, some people were able to take advantage of it and some people were completely set back by it. And it doesn't mean you can't reverse course. It's not like you permanent, but totally. There are people way down, psychologically and financially from the whole thing.
Absolutely.
But you speak about it very presciently, and I love that you're speaking at it from the time, because reading what you wrote in 2020 is so much more tactile, than remembering it back.
I don't know if I could write it like that, remembering it back. No. I'm really grateful to have that record of it.
Right, and I was 27 when it happened.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, I would like to close, if you don't mind, with a really, really great story. Can you please turn to page 74?
Did we already do the whole time?
The what? We did the whole book. Here we go.
74.
All right, there we go.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Let me show you.
Okay.
I think I know exactly where to start. I think you can just start right there if you want to.
Okay.
Okay.
Should I set this up?
Yeah, go ahead. That's a good idea.
I was a Girl Scout for a brief time. I did the brownies. I went to the juniors. I crossed over the bridge. They gave me junior mints, and I was like, fuck yeah, bye. That's it. This was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm Jewish. Most of them aren't. And this takes place at a Girl Scout meeting at my neighbor Jessica's house. So, you're Jewish, right? Jessica asked me. Yeah, I said. So, you don't celebrate Christmas, right? She continued. Nope, we have Hanukkah instead. So, does that mean you don't believe in Jesus? Look, I just want to interject here for a second to say that I had already answered these questions about 30 times a year from the time I left preschool at Temple Albert in Albuquerque and started kindergarten at Martin Luther King Elementary in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Most of the kids I went to school with were Catholic or Baptist, and lots of them had never met another Jew. By this time, in second grade, I'd basically had the answers to these questions tattooed inside my eyelids. I'm telling you this because you're going to perhaps find it very hard to believe that what I said next is actually what I said. Well, my 7-year-old mouth began. Jews believe that Jesus existed as a historical person. It's not that we don't believe he was real, we just don't believe that he was the Son of God or that he is the Messiah. I was aware that I was talking like an adult. I was aware that I was not blonde, that I was not like them, that I was different. I started wearing that as a badge of honor pretty early in my life. When I would tell my parents that someone had called me weird, they would always say the same thing. Normal is boring. Who wants to be normal? Jessica and Tracy made eye contact with each other, then looked back at me. I was peeling the last bit of flesh off of the orange slice in my hands. Yeah, well, my mom says that means you're going to hell, Jessica concluded. I think I knew somewhere in my developing brain that this was Jessica's mom's problem, not hers or mine. And I knew that religion was a sensitive issue for some people because I'd been learning about the Holocaust since I could fucking form words. But no one had ever used mine against me in this way before, and I felt totally betrayed. I finished chewing, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, Santa Claus is just your parents buying you presents. Why don't you go ask your mom about that?
That's fantastic. I love it.
I'm so glad I didn't say that in front of my nephew.
Maybe it's good you're waiting for give it a little time.
Yeah.
Not kidding. Before we go, I would love you to give us just a little bit of the history of the real Pop and Dutch and the mystery.
Yeah. So Pop and Dutch were Sean's great-grandparents, kind of. His great-grandmother kicked her husband out of the house because he was an abusive, alcoholic dickhead. And her brother came to live with them and help raise the kids. So their nicknames were Pop and Dutch. Pop because he was Pop, and Dutch because she nicknamed herself Duchess. She just was like, call me Duchess. In real life from now on. And someone in Sean's family told me this story very casually, and I was like, what? What did you just say? So I got obsessed with that, and we always loved the way their names sounded together, and they had a really fascinating relationship and family. They were, oh my God, klutz. They were raising kids as like a totally non-traditional family because of circumstances outside of themselves. Dutch wore elbow gloves, as I am to understand. Yeah. And Pop was like smoking Pall Malls and drinking Ballantine and eating sardines out of the tin. And just that combination of like highbrow, lowbrow, glamour, and trash is exactly all the things that we love.
It's like a Brooklyn Green Acres.
Yes, basically. So they actually lived right off Cape. They lived in Manomet.
Oh, really?
And we have a picture in our shop of Sean's grandmother, Lorraine, who was like in her 20s at the time, holding hands with both of them on the lawn. And just really love that spirit of like we don't have to do everything exactly the way everybody else has done it. Let's try something new and make it better.
That's true. And you have done that. And the book is fucking great. And I love you so much.
I love you so much.